I just want to offer my heartfelt condolences.
How truly sorry we are for the failings that led to the harm.
My condolences to all the families, and I'm really sorry for all the distress.
I would like to apologise for any personal failings.
It happened on my watch as Health Secretary.
We've heard a lot of apologies, heard about countless failings and many missed opportunities. Since September, Liverpool Town Hall has been the backdrop for a public inquiry looking at how Lucy Letby was able to attack and murder babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital and what lessons can be learned. It's been 4 months of evidence and more than 100 witnesses, uncovering new details about Letby, the neonatal unit where she worked, and the experiences of her victims' families. Much of this evidence was never revealed in the criminal trial. Evidence like Letby's character, with colleagues describing her as cold, strange and uncompassionate. We learnt for the first time that Letby failed her final year student placement due to concerns about her professionalism and empathy. 2 serious nursing errors were also revealed. One where she gave a newborn baby boy 10 times the dose of morphine he required, a potentially fatal mistake, and another where she gave antibiotics to a newborn who didn't need them.
An audit at Liverpool Women's Hospital, where Letby did a separate placement, found babies' breathing tubes were dislodged at an unusual rate during her time there. Incidents were recorded on 40% of her shifts, when typically they'd expect them in less than 1%.
And another revelation from one of the consultants on the neonatal ward, Dr. Breary, telling the inquiry he believes Letby may have killed other children on his unit before those she's already been convicted of murdering.
It's likely that Letby didn't start becoming a killer in June 2015. I think it's likely that her actions prior to then changed what we perceive to be abnormal.
The inquiry's been looking at who knew what and when. Was there a cover-up, and what mistakes were made?
One doctor telling the inquiry that as early as September 2015, just 3 months into Letby's killing spree, nurses were huddled around a computer checking rotas for a common denominator.
I remember being quite shocked and thinking, oh, I agreed that it's an awful thing to think. I mean, it is the unthinkable.
But it would be almost 2 years later before police were called.
The barrister for some of the families of Letby's victims told the inquiry there were 5 basic failures from the period when Letby began harming babies. Firstly, the failure to conduct swift and careful investigations into each of the deaths. Following that, clusters of deaths and near-fatal collapses should have been immediately escalated to senior management, which didn't happen. Then, when investigations did happen, those overseeing them should have been thinking about the possibility of a criminal act. They should have had serial killer Beverly Allett in the back of their minds. There was a failure to tell the police and coroner about their concerns from the outset, and poor communication with the babies' families, including some parents not even being told their child had collapsed or that their deaths were being investigated.
There was a balancing act between a duty of candour to the families and a duty of care for Letby. We heard for the very first time at this inquiry from those hospital managers, those at the very top in charge of running the trust. These bosses weren't called to give evidence at Letby's criminal trials and resisted media interviews, so their evidence was highly revealing.
Letby's father was very angry. He was making threats, threatening GMC referrals for the doctors. He's threatening guns to my head and all sorts of things.
Much was made of managers being more concerned with the reputation of the hospital than patient safety. Consultants had tried to raise concerns about Letby, but the inquiry heard this was a hospital where a culture of fear and blame existed, with staff not comfortable with speaking out.
They were worried that their jobs were at stake if they stood up and said what they thought. And it was a genuine concern, wasn't it?
If that was how they felt, then yes, but I can think of nothing that was done or said that would have, certainly from my perspective, threatened their career or their standing.
You know, you said to me, why didn't you just stand up and tell everyone what you thought had happened? It's the fear of not being believed. It's the fear of ridicule. It's the fear of accusations of bullying.
But all the evidence has now been heard at this inquiry. In March, we will hear closing statements from each of the legal teams. But Lady Justice Thirlwall's report and her findings on just what went wrong and what lessons should be learnt is not expected to be published until the autumn. Mel Barham, ITV News.